Good day, everyone. My name is Jennifer Smith, and today I will be discussing the heat event in Western Canada. Let's begin with the general weather scenario. A ridge of high pressure located, can you please, next slide, please. Thank you. A ridge of high pressure located over Western North America is setting up a prolonged heat event in Western Canada. While the core or the epicenter of the heat is located further south over Northern California, it is expanding north and east this week. High pressure causes air to sink and dry out, reducing cloud cover and leading to hot temperatures. Environment and Climate Change Canada's meteorologists have been monitoring this high pressure system as it develops. Weather offices across Western Canada have issued heat warnings for part of British Columbia, Southern Northwest Territories, Alberta, and part of Saskatchewan presently. In terms of just how hot it is going to get, the forecast varies by region due to the diverse geography in the West. But broadly speaking, daytime highs are forecast to be 30 to 35 degrees Celsius, with some locations exceeding 35 degrees Celsius in parts of Alberta and Saskatchewan, and southern interior BC, where temperatures in the low 40s are forecast. Nighttime temperatures are expected to be in the mid to high teens for the period, limiting overnight cooling. This is especially true east of the Rockies later in the week, with the expected humid conditions making for muggy nights and overnight lows closer to 20 degrees Celsius. This will exacerbate health risks since it will deprive people without access to cooling of the chance for temporary relief. Relatively cooler temperatures can be found near the water and at higher elevations in the mountains. These may be options to escape the heat depending on where one lives. The heat warnings issued by Environment Canada contain messaging developed in collaboration with Health Canada, recommending a range of heat safety measures, such as relocating to a cooler location or a cooling center, and recognizing the signs of heat illness. This is the first widespread heat event of the year for Western Canada. The area has had a few hot days so far this year, but southern BC, for instance, has had a cool May and June, so residents' bodies are not acclimated to the heat. It's important to think about how to prepare for this event and to support those who are most vulnerable to the impacts of extreme heat. Next slide, please. Above normal temperatures developed across southern BC over the weekend. The heat will continue there and expand east, affecting Alberta and southwestern Northwest Territories today, Saskatchewan by Tuesday, and spreading into Manitoba by Wednesday. Referring to the scale on the left, the shading on the map corresponds to how abnormally high the temperatures are forecast to be, where the most abnormally high temperatures can be seen shifting southeast through the week. This warm spell is likely to linger into next week, particularly across southern BC and the Prairie provinces, though it's a bit early to offer a high confidence forecast this far into the future, but with many outdoor events ongoing, for example, the Calgary Stampede or the Winnipeg Folk Festival, it's encouraged to take extra precautions against the heat. Drink lots of water, stay in the shade, and arrange for regular checkups on family members, neighbors, and friends in case they may need help. Next slide, please. It is important to note that while this heat event is significant and impactful, particularly for its projected duration, it is not the same as the 2021 heat event. In 2021, heat warning thresholds were met and then surpassed by an enormous margin. All-time national records were broken. This does not happen every year or even every few years. That was truly an anomalous and extreme heat wave. The highest temperatures forecast for this event are expected to be lower for the areas that saw the worst heat in 2021. Further to that, the 2021 event did not impact Saskatchewan and Manitoba, but this one will, in the form of a long-duration humid heat event. With the current heat event, several daily records may be broken across the region throughout the event, but all-time records should not be threatened. These hot and dry conditions will heighten wildfire risks, particularly where there are existing fires or there is a precipitation deficit, such as in northeastern BC, northern Alberta, and the Northwest Territories. Air quality is already poor in these regions, and air quality advisories have been issued. Lastly, extreme heat can affect everyone's health. We need to take care of each other, especially our vulnerable populations. Stay informed about weather warnings where you are and check on friends and family who are vulnerable to the heat and make sure they have access to someplace cool. Next slide, please. To access the latest weather information, watches, warnings, and advisories, please download the Weather Can app, visit us on our website or social media, phone into Hello Weather, or tune into Weather Radio. I will now pass the microphone to my colleagues at Health Canada to speak to the health impacts of this heat event and their recommendations for staying safe. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jen. Well, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Peter Barry, and I'm from Health Canada. The current extreme heat event that is affecting many people in Western Canada can pose serious risks to health. Extreme heat can affect anyone. However, Indigenous peoples, older adults, infants and young children, and people with chronic illnesses are at greater risk. This can include people with diabetes, those experiencing mental illness, or those with cardiovascular or lung disease. People experiencing homelessness and people who work outdoors or exercise in the heat are also at greater risk during extreme heat events. Being prepared for hot weather, being able to identify the symptoms of heat illness, and knowing what to do to cool down are critical steps all people in Canada should know to protect themselves and their loved ones. It's important to recognize the signs of heat illness, such as dizziness or fainting, nausea, headache, unusually rapid breathing and heartbeat, or extreme thirst. If you have any of these symptoms during extreme heat, move to a cool place and drink liquids right away. Water's best. Heat illnesses are mainly caused by overexposure to extreme heat or overexertion. These illnesses can include heat exhaustion, heat fainting, heat edema, which is swelling of hands, feet, and ankles, heat rash, and heat cramps. Heat illnesses can also lead to long-term health problems or even death. There are three key things you can do during an extreme heat event. Be informed. Keep up to date with local weather forecasts and alerts, and arrange for regular and frequent check-ins on your family members, neighbors, or friends in case they need help. Get hydrated. Drink plenty of liquids, especially water, before you feel thirsty. And stay cool. The most effective ways to protect yourself from extreme heat while indoors, in addition to staying hydrated, is using air conditioning, blocking the sun by closing awnings, curtains, or blinds during the day, using fans, taking cool showers or baths, making meals that don't need to be cooked in the oven, and spending time in a cool place like a community center or library. And remember, never leave people in your care or pets inside a parked vehicle in summer because it can get dangerously hot very fast. And when there's an extreme heat event occurring with wildfire smoke, prioritize keeping cool because overheating can be more dangerous to your health. We need to also remember that heat stroke is a medical emergency. If you witness someone with complete or partial loss of consciousness who is confused, has a high body temperature, or has stopped sweating, call 911 or your local emergency number immediately. While waiting for help, take measures to cool the person right away by moving them to a cooler place if possible, applying cold water to large areas of the skin or clothing, and fanning the person as much as possible. So it's important that people should continue to follow the advice of local and provincial health authorities on how to protect themselves and others during this heat event, and to understand what resources are available to help them keep cool in their area. Thanks.
Okay, go ahead, Jennifer.
Okay. Bonjour à tous, je m'appelle Jennifer Smith et je parlerai de la chaleur de l'Ouest du Canada. Commençons par le scénario météorologique général. Diapositive suivant. Une crête située au-dessus de l'ouest de l'Amérique du Nord est responsable d'un épisode de chaleur prolongé dans l'ouest du Canada. Alors que l'épicentre de chaleur est plus au sud, au nord de la Californie, la masse d'air chaud s'étend au nord et à l'est cette semaine. La crête fait descendre et sécher l'air qui réduit la couverture nuageuse et cause des températures chaudes. Les météorologues d'Environnement et Changement climatique Canada surveillent l'évolution de ce système de haute pression. Les bureaux météorologiques de l'Ouest du Canada ont émis des avertissements de chaleur pour certaines parties de la Colombie-Britannique, le sud des territoires du Nord-Ouest, l'Alberta et certaines parties de la Saskatchewan actuellement. Pour ce qui est de la température, les prévisions varient d'une région à l'autre en raison de la variabilité géographique dans l'Ouest, mais les températures maximales diurnes devraient se situer entre 30 et 35 degrés Celsius. Certaines régions dépassent 35 Celsius, dont certaines parties de l'Alberta et de la Saskatchewan, et dans le sud intérieur de la Colombie-Britannique, où des températures de 40 à 42 sont prévues. Les minimums nocturnes devraient être de 15 à 19 degrés Celsius pour la période, limitant le refroidissement nocturne. Cela est particulièrement vrai à l'est des Rocheuses plus tard dans la semaine. Les conditions humides prévues rendant les nuits humides et les minimums nocturnes proches de 20 degrés Celsius. Cela exacerbera les risques pour la santé car cela privera les personnes sans accès à un endroit climatisé la possibilité d'un soulagement temporaire. Des températures relativement plus fraîches sont attendues près de l'eau et à des altitudes plus élevées dans les montagnes. Il peut s'agir d'options pour échapper à la chaleur selon l'endroit où l'on vit. Les avertissements de chaleur émis par Environnement et Changement climatique Canada contiennent des messages sur la santé élaborés en collaboration avec Santé Canada et recommandant une gamme de mesures de sécurité en matière de chaleur, comme se déplacer dans un endroit plus frais ou dans une haute fraîcheur publique, et la reconnaissance des signes de maladie causés par la chaleur. La région a connu quelques jours de chaleur jusqu'à présent cet été, mais le sud de la Colombie-Britannique, par exemple, a connu une période de fraîcheur en mai et en juin, de sorte que le corps des résidents ne sont pas acclimatisés à la chaleur. Il est important de réfléchir à la façon de se préparer à cet événement de chaleur et de soutenir les personnes les plus vulnérables aux effets de la chaleur accablante. Diapositive suivante. Des températures supérieures à la normale ont commencé à être observées dans le sud de la Colombie-Britannique au cours de la fin de semaine. La chaleur continuera là-bas et s'étendra vers l'est, touchant l'Alberta et le sud-ouest des territoires du nord-ouest aujourd'hui, la Saskatchewan d'ici mardi et s'entendra au Manitoba d'ici mercredi. En se référant à l'échelle de couleur sur la gauche, l'ombrage sur la carte correspond à l'intensité des anomalies des températures prévues où les températures les plus anormalement élevées se déplacent vers l'est, au sud-est, au cours de la semaine. Il est probable que cette période de chaleur se prolonge pendant une bonne partie de la semaine prochaine, particulièrement dans le sud de la Colombie-Britannique et dans les provinces des Prairies. Il est un peu tôt pour offrir une prévision de confiance élevée loin dans l'avenir, mais avec de nombreux événements en plein air en cours, par exemple le Stampede à Calgary et le Folk Fest à Winnipeg, il est encouragé à prendre des précautions supplémentaires contre la chaleur. Buvez beaucoup d'eau, restez à l'ombre et organisez un suivi régulier des membres de votre famille, de vos voisins et de vos amis au cas où ils auraient besoin d'aide. Diapositive suivante. Il est important de noter que bien que cet événement de chaleur soit significatif, en particulier pour sa durée prévue, il n'est pas aussi significatif que l'événement de chaleur de 2021. En 2021, les seuils d'avertissement de chaleur ont été atteints et largement surpassés. Des records nationaux ont été battus. Cela ne se produit pas chaque année, ni même toutes les quelques années. Les températures les plus élevées prévues pour cet événement devraient être plus basses dans les régions qui ont connu la pire chaleur en 2021. De plus, l'événement de 2021 n'a pas eu d'incidence sur la Saskatchewan et le Manitoba, mais celui-ci affectera ces régions. Il prendra la forme d'une chaleur humide de longue durée. Avec la chaleur actuelle, plusieurs records quotidiens peuvent être battus dans la région pendant cet événement, mais les records historiques ne devraient pas être battus. Ces conditions chaudes et sèches augmenteront les risques de feux de forêt, particulièrement où il y a des incendies ou un déficit de précipitation est observé, comme dans le nord-est de la Colombie-Britannique, le nord de l'Alberta et les territoires du nord-ouest. La qualité de l'air est déjà mauvaise dans ces régions et des avis sur la qualité de l'air ont été émis. Enfin, la chaleur accablante peut affecter la santé de tout le monde. Nous devons prendre soin les uns des autres, en particulier de nos populations vulnérables. Restez informés des avertissements météorologiques et consultez les amis et les membres de votre famille qui sont vulnérables de la chaleur et assurez-vous qu'ils ont accès à un endroit frais. Diapositive suivante. Pour accéder aux renseignements météorologiques, les alertes ou avertissements, les veilles et les avis, veuillez télécharger l'application MétéoCan. Visitez-nous sur notre site web ou les réseaux sociaux. Téléphonez à Bonjour Météo ou syntonisez votre radio météo. Je vais maintenant céder la parole à mes collègues de Santé Canada qui parleront des répercussions de cette période de chaleur sur la santé et de leurs recommandations pour assurer la sécurité. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Jennifer. Bonjour tout le monde. Mon nom, c'est Éric Lavigne. Je suis de Santé Canada. L'épisode actuel de chaleur accablante qui touche plusieurs personnes dans l'Ouest canadien peut présenter de graves risques pour la santé. La chaleur extrême peut affecter tout le monde. Cependant, les personnes âgées, les nourrissons, les jeunes enfants, les personnes atteintes de maladies chroniques sont les plus à risque, comme les gens qui, par exemple, souffrent de diabète, qui vivent avec une maladie mentale ou ceux qui souffrent de maladies cardiovasculaires. Les personnes en situation d'itinérance et des personnes qui travaillent, qui font des exercices à l'extérieur sont aussi plus à risque lors de périodes de chaleur accablante. Être préparé à la chaleur, être capable d'identifier les symptômes des maladies liées à la chaleur et savoir quoi faire pour se rafraîchir sont des mesures essentielles que tous les gens au Canada devraient prendre pour se protéger et protéger leurs proches. Il est important de reconnaître les signes des maladies liées à la chaleur comme les étourdissements, les évanouissements, les nausées, les maux de tête, une respiration et un rythme cardiaque inhabituellement rapide ou la soif extrême. Si vous ressentez l'un de ces symptômes en cas de chaleur extrême, déplacez-vous vers un endroit frais et buvez immédiatement des liquides, l'eau étant la meilleure option. Les maladies liées à la chaleur sont principalement causées par une surexposition à une chaleur extrême ou à un surmenage. Ces maladies comprennent l'épuisement dû à la chaleur, les évanouissements liés à la chaleur, l'œdème dû à la chaleur, c'est-à-dire le gonflement des mains, des pieds, des chevilles, les éruptions cutanées et les crampes causées par la chaleur. Elles peuvent aussi entraîner des problèmes de santé à long terme ainsi que la mort. Il y a 3 actions clés que vous pouvez faire lors d'un épisode de chaleur accablante. Numéro 1, restez informé. Tenez-vous au courant des prévisions des alertes météorologiques locales. Prévoyez des visites régulières, fréquentes des membres de votre famille, des voisins, des amis au cas où ils auraient besoin d'aide. Hydratez-vous, buvez beaucoup de liquide, surtout de l'eau avant d'avoir soif, et restez au frais. Le moyen le plus efficace de se protéger contre la chaleur extrême lorsque vous êtes à l'extérieur, à l'intérieur, est de rester hydraté, d'utiliser la climatisation, de bloquer le soleil en fermant les auvents, les rideaux, les stores pendant la journée et d'utiliser des ventilateurs, de prendre des douches, des bains frais, de préparer des repas qui n'ont pas besoin d'être cuits au four et de passer du temps dans un endroit frais comme un centre communautaire ou une bibliothèque. Souvenez-vous de ne jamais laisser les personnes, les animaux dont vous avez la garde à l'intérieur d'un véhicule stationné pendant l'été. Le coup de chaleur est une urgence médicale. Si vous remarquez une personne qui éprouve une perte de conscience totale ou partielle, une confusion, une température corporelle élevée ou qui ne transpire plus, composez immédiatement le 911 ou votre numéro d'urgence locale. En attendant les secours, prenez des mesures immédiates pour rafraîchir la personne en la déplaçant si possible vers un endroit plus frais, en appliquant de l'eau froide sur de grandes zones de la peau ou des vêtements et en éventant la personne autant que possible. Les gens devraient continuer à suivre les conseils des autorités sanitaires locales et provinciales sur la façon de se protéger et de protéger les autres pendant cet épisode de chaleur afin de savoir quelles ressources sont disponibles pour les aider à rester au frais dans leur région. Merci beaucoup.
Merci. Merci beaucoup. Thank you, Jennifer, Peter, et Eric. We will now continue with question period section where Jennifer, Armel, Greg, Peter, and Eric can address questions. Nous allons maintenant passer à la période de questions au cours de laquelle Jennifer, Armel, Greg, Peter, et Eric pourront répondre aux questions. To ask your question via Zoom, please use the hand raising function or by phone, press *9 followed by *6 to unmute yourself. To be called upon, we ask that you make sure your name and your media outlet are clearly identified in your Zoom name. Veuillez utiliser la fonction main levée si vous avez une question ou sur un téléphone, veuillez appuyer étoile 9 suivi par étoile 6 pour établir le son. Pour poser une question, nous vous demandons de vous assurer que votre nom et votre média soient clairement identifiés dans votre nom Zoom. The first question is from Robert Buffin. Go ahead, Robert, from CTV News Vancouver.
Okay, hopefully you can hear me now.
We can.
Yeah, great. Assuming you can. I guess my first question is, which communities in BC are expected to get the highest temperatures and how high will they be, along with how many records for heat can we expect today?
Hi, Robert. Thanks for the question. Yeah, BC is definitely seeing its warmest temperatures over the next couple of days, and we are expecting places, the usual suspects, between Kamloops, Silhouette, Lytton, even into the Okanagan, to perhaps crest into the 40-degree mark. It will be very close. Some places will get to 39, others will maybe get up to 40, 41. So between today, tomorrow, on Tuesday, and starting to see the edge of this event on Wednesday, where we would expect temperatures to be a few degrees cooler, but still quite a bit above seasonal temperatures throughout the rest of the week and even into next weekend.
Go ahead with
yeah, by way of follow-up, I have a question for a colleague, and I'm hoping to sort of jam in another one myself. My colleague's wondering about if somebody, perhaps Armel, could speak to temperatures on the island and specifically Port Alberni, how hot it'll get there. And I'm also just wondering if somebody can weigh in on this issue of overnight temperatures. I gather they're going to be mid-teens at night. If that's an issue, because I know in 2021 that was part of the problem, was temperatures didn't go down much at night. Is that going to be a similar issue during this heat situation?
Yeah, it's a great question, Rob. First of all, the temperatures for Port Alberni are and have been for the last couple of days getting into the middle 30s. So 35, 36, 37 over the coming 2 days are definitely expected with a relatively high certainty. Overnight, of course, the temperatures are a proxy for humidity, and this air mass for BC in particular is actually quite dry. So we are expecting the temperatures to stay at around 16 degrees for the spine of the island overnight, and that will cause the heat warning to be valid. But we are not looking at the temperatures and that humidity to be present to the point where the temperatures were staying well above 20 degrees, if you'll remember, in late June of 2021. So there's a pretty big distinction between what we saw then and what we are seeing now, and that should start to ease off as well as early as Tuesday night into Wednesday. The temperatures are projected to only reach into the low teens for Port Alberni, Lake Cowichan, places in the middle of the island.
Okay, our next question, notre deuxième question, c'est, je m'excuse, c'est Aaron Schultz. Aaron est avec, je m'excuse. Go ahead, Aaron.
Hi there. Thank you, and sorry for the wait there. Had some technical difficulties on our end. This may have been asked. I wasn't able to catch the first half of the first question and follow-up, but it seems like from the graphic that the ridge of high pressure may be going more towards the prairies, escaping the Thompson and Nicola and Shuswap regions in BC's southern interior. It seems like while that ridge is going and the lower temperatures may hit the mid-teens, the daytime highs are still going to be above normal for the foreseeable future. So I'm just wondering what's the forecast for Environment Canada on when maybe residents within the southern interior, like the Thompsons, the Nicola, the Shuswap, would be able to get some normal or maybe below normal temperatures, or when things may slightly cool down?
Hi, Aaron, it's Armel again. Great questions. Yeah, the province is delineated into a variety of different regions because they have different climatologies, what we can expect to see. So places in the South Thompson and part of the Southwest Interior, like Salmon Arm and the Shuswap, need to reach up to 35 degrees during the daytime and overnight stay above 18 degrees. And we are projecting that at least for the next couple of days before things start to taper off very slightly on Wednesday evening. So those locations will remain in the heat warning for the coming few days. The really important thing to note here is that we are projecting temperatures to ease off ever so slightly, but still be really speaking to about 8 to 9 degrees above seasonal still for the remainder of the week. So those will be just shy of the heat warning criteria, but they are not looking to remain or to go below seasonal values, which of course would be closer to 26 degrees during the daytime and 11 overnight. So that is probably true well into the forecast, probably until the end of July at the earliest.
Any follow-up questions before we continue?
Yes, one follow-up. I guess, is there anything on the horizon? I know it's always such a tight window for an extended forecast, but any hint of precipitation for the southern interior once this stretch of above normal temperature and this heat wave is past us?
Yeah, this event, the ongoing part of this event is extremely important, and I'm glad you brought it up. We are seeing the ridge breakdown, which is just a term to say that the troughiness of the atmosphere is going to have a bit of an open door as early as Tuesday afternoon and certainly on Wednesday. And the locations that we're most concerned about, of course, are essentially for the lack of precipitation, but as a front makes its way through the province, and that could bring essentially what we call dry lightning. So lightning associated to an upper feature where there's just not enough moisture yet, and yet the ground is, of course, curing at very high and dry temperatures and humidities. So we are having very close collaborations with the BC Wildfire Service to discuss how to warn our emergency management colleagues, both for Tuesday afternoon and Wednesday, and that will be done today. And again, this could be a very important date that we remember because the wildfire concerns are obviously gaining steam very quickly over the course of an event like this one.
Okay. La prochaine question nous provient de Audrey Nouveau, Radio-Canada Montréal. Voici, Audrey.
Bonjour, est-ce que vous m'entendez bien?
Oui.
Ah, excellent. Merci. Ma question est pour Environnement Canada. J'aimerais savoir pourquoi voit-on des vagues de chaleur en ce moment dans les extrémités du pays, mais pas au centre du pays?
Je peux vous donner une réponse pour commencer, et je suis sûr que mes collègues peuvent en rajouter. Audrey, c'est une bonne question. Pour l'instant, on a un pays qui fait 4 fuseaux horaires et demi, donc c'est extrêmement grand, le Canada. Et pour l'instant, on a vu ce qu'on a vu en Ontario, le Québec et les provinces maritimes en fin juin. Et là, on se retrouve à voir une vague de chaleur qui est plutôt basée au sud, comme elle l'a dit Jennifer, en Californie, et qui se propage jusque à nos latitudes aussi. Donc, et ce qu'on va voir, c'est que cette vague de chaleur va se propager éventuellement dans les régions du Manitoba aussi, qui est techniquement le centre du pays. Mais il se peut aussi qu'on voit des patrons météorologiques qui pourraient être plus centrés sur le centre du pays dans les prochaines semaines. Donc, c'est vraiment pas exclusif à une côte ou l'autre, et que le centre du pays il n'y a pas d'immunité à la chaleur et des grandes patrons météorologiques qui bloquent de cette manière.
Et question de suivi, observez-vous davantage de vagues de chaleur tôt dans l'année depuis quelques années au Canada?
Alors, encore une fois, on a vu ça l'année dernière pour le mois de mai. On a vu une vague de chaleur excessivement forte, plus forte encore, et ça nous a donné des températures vraiment qui ressemblaient au mois de juillet, mais au mois de mai. Donc oui, on a déjà vu ça récemment. Il y a eu des études d'attribution justement sur ce phénomène, et je sais qu'on a Dr. Greg Flato qui pourrait peut-être en parler. Donc, c'est ce à quoi on s'attend, des vagues de chaleur qui peuvent commencer plus tôt dans la saison estivale et qui peuvent durer aussi plus tard dans la saison estivale. Donc, de voir du potentiel comme ça qui peut durer jusqu'au mois de septembre, même quand traditionnellement on les voyait vraiment aboutir plutôt vers la mi-août.
Okay. The next question is from Newsnet. Go ahead, Newsnet. Can't hear anybody from Newsnet. One last chance before we switch to the next person. We can always circle back if you get your audio up and working later. La prochaine question au Anne-Marie Trickney, RDI, Alberta. OK. Je pense qu'elle a enlevé les mains. The next question, Jessica Durling, Nanaimo News Bureau. Jessica, go ahead.
Thank you very much. My question is, as you're aware, several heat records were broken yesterday across BC, including our community of Nanaimo. We're wondering what that means for the community and how concerned about this record-breaking heat day, what we should think of that.
Hi there again. Yes, I noticed that as well. The temperatures crested above 33 degrees, 33.3 degrees for Nanaimo. So that was a daily record set back in 2010 was the previous one at 32.2. Yeah, those are obviously large numbers to contend with, and they're anomalous. But just thinking back to what Jennifer Smith mentioned earlier, we are looking at temperatures here that are some things that we see not necessarily every summer, but certainly in the plausible realm of a yearly event, sometimes even twice or three times in a year. So again, the temperatures can break a daily record, but they're not necessarily breaking all-time records or all-time July records. And that's where the distinction is between this event and what we saw in late June of 2021, where the temperatures were reaching well above this, and of course, over several days. And so then kind of all-time records for many, many stations right across BC, and in some cases, the prairies and even into NWT were being eclipsed during that event. And this is much more of a reasonable or normal amount of heat for this time of year.
For a follow-up question, thank you so much. When will this heat wave be expected to die down for the mid-Vancouver Island region?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was alluding to a bit of a changing air mass, and we're going to see some impacts from the Pacific, really, which is our Mother Nature's air conditioning for the South Coast, particularly Vancouver Island. So, as early as, tomorrow we'll still see similar temperatures. I'll say that right away. 32, 33, 34 degrees is certainly possible. And of course, we'll remember that places like Nanaimo are right on the water. So places that are closer to the water will see temperatures probably a hair below that. But others into the inland sections could approach what Port Alberni will see in parts of the elevated regions around Nanaimo. So 35, 36 degrees, certainly not impossible there. But come Wednesday, the temperature will start to diminish by about 4 or 5 degrees, getting up into the upper 20s. And then by Thursday, we'll see the temperatures, within 2 or 3 degrees of normal conditions, which is 24-degree maximums at this time of year. So we'll be in that 26, 27-degree time frame. Before things warm up again for next weekend. The details remain to be seen, but it doesn't look like as strong or as long of an event, but certainly a couple more days, Saturday, Sunday, are in the forecast as to kind of bumping up closer to 30 degrees again.
Okay. Notre pression, the next question will be going to, pardon me, Shannon Scott, CBC North Yellowknife. Shannon, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. I'm wondering if you can paint us a bit of a picture about how this heat wave is going to impact the Northwest Territories. I saw on your maps that the southern part of the territory is going to be the most impacted. So I'm wondering if you can let us know what it's going to look like for us down there and how long it's going to last, and whether we're going to see that push up into the Decho and North Slave as well.
Hi, is Jennifer Smith speaking. Thank you for the great question. Yes, it's definitely, this heat event is definitely extending quite a bit further north. It's the epicenter, as I mentioned before, is centered in California, and it's extending north along the BC coast, and it is stretching into the southern Northwest Territories, but it's not expected to project too much further north than that. The whole system is going to translate east and slowly collapse south, if you will, over the course of time. So it is not expected to extend further north and further into the territory than the regions displayed on the map.
Okay, thank you. Can you just, as my follow-up, can you just paint a bit of a picture for us as to what specifically people in the South Slave will be experiencing? I'm seeing currently heat warnings for Samba Cay, Fort Liard, and Wood Buffalo National Park. Those are the areas that we would cover.
Okay. So I've got that. I'm looking at that as well, and I can see that in addition to heat, there's obviously air quality challenges in the area as well. But looking at heat itself, We're just looking at temperatures probably right around 30, 31 degrees in that time frame. Overnight low is about 14 degrees, so the mid-teens temperatures, and that's going to last for the next couple of days. It looks like it's going to start to cool off as that ridge sinks south, collapse south and east. So things should improve on Thursday, but the next couple of days are going to be hot around 30 degrees with overnight lows in the teens, and with the smoke in the area, there's definitely air quality concerns.
Okay, our next question will be going to Emily Simmons, Global News Saskatoon. Go ahead, Emily.
Oh, hello. Sorry about that. My question is just for Saskatchewan focus, but I'm just wondering, when is the temperature going to peak in Saskatchewan, maybe focusing on the Saskatoon, Regina part of the province, and then how long is that heat expected to last?
Great question. The heat is working its way east. So we've started to see it build into British Columbia. It's moving into Alberta, and it should be starting. Those above normal temperatures should start to drift in Wednesday, with the highest temperatures expected on Thursday in sort of the central Saskatchewan region around Saskatoon, and then that area is going to shift southeast, moving it more into Manitoba, southern Manitoba. So the window for the highest temperatures is probably looking at a Wednesday, Thursday timeframe for Saskatoon. Sorry, does that answer your question?
Yes, that does. Thank you so much. But I did
Okay.
have a follow-up. So you mentioned humidity in Saskatchewan. So what does a
Yeah.
humid heat look like? And does that mean we could have a high chance of storm after this week?
That's a very good question. Yes, essentially, you've got that ridge of high pressure aloft that's creating the environment that's very, very warm. But you also have a surface pattern, right? So you've got that high pressure at the surface, and as it drifts east, it's going to allow the winds from the south to draw into the region, and this is going to draw all that warm, moist air from the Gulf into the southeast, into the eastern prairies, essentially. And so that's what's going to give that humid environment. It's a very classic setup in the summertime where you get the muggy, warm air from the south. That's the type of setup that we're looking to move into the region. So that sort of Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday timeframe with overnight lows in the upper teens as a result of those muggy conditions. That's what we're expecting. Now, in terms of storm activity and whatnot, I can't give a specific forecast for it, but I can say that in general, as a ridge of high pressure starts to collapse and sink south, the possibility for storms does exist depending on how far south that ridge does collapse. It's around that periphery where we do see storms. If they were to form, they would be kind of riding that ridge, if you will. So if it collapses and sinks south enough to encompass Saskatoon, then that would be something to keep an eye on. It's very hard to tell this early on where that ridge and that boundary is going to set up as to whether there will definitely be storms, but if it does, it certainly raises the potential.
Okay, our next question will be going to Yasmin Gania at CBC Vancouver. Go ahead, Yasmin.
Hello. Thank you for taking my questions. My first one is, some parts of BC with unseasonably warm temperatures haven't had heat warnings issued. Can you explain the process behind which locations are issued warnings and which aren't?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question. So as was mentioned, there's climatologic factors that make it heat more produced in the south of the province versus the north versus places that are more coastal. In fact, we are divided into 5 regions in the province, and for this, the parts of the province that haven't reached heat warning criteria, it's in this case because it's a dry air mass, particularly further west you go. It's because the overnight lows are usually dipping below those criteria, and and then you have a chance of respite. Just like our Health Canada colleagues mentioned, we are dealing with a moderate risk to human health, especially when indoor air temperatures are creeping up, and the day-over-day effect on indoor air temperatures is extremely high in those kinds of scenarios. When the overnight lows dip low enough, if they get down to 11, 12 degrees, that's enough to bring that respite to the building infrastructure and for people to get a break, and makes it a less dangerous scenario. So for the regions that have not got the heat warning in BC, that's exactly why we're not issuing them for there. Otherwise, we would have heat warnings right across the board. So some places are just cooling off enough overnight. This is the short answer.
Thank you. And can you also specifically speak to weather conditions in the Fraser Valley and Abbotsford and what people there should expect in the coming days?
Yes, I can. So Abbotsford and the Fraser Valley are an interesting place because sometimes we deal with temperatures that are affected by outflow winds. In this case, we are dealing with a southwesterly flow. So we are looking at temperatures that are moderated by the Salish Sea, by Juan de Fuca Strait, and they are helping Vancouver first off because of the first connection to the water body, but also the Fraser Valley. And the temperatures have been right on the threshold. So on Friday, we did not have the heat warnings out, but we've noticed that the temperatures have been creeping up just a little bit more than the models on Thursday and Friday were indicating. So we've issued the heat warning for Abbotsford, for the Fraser Valley, and they will stay current at least until Tuesday. And then Tuesday night, we'll see the temperatures really be right close to threshold again. And then by Wednesday, they would need to reach up to 33 degrees in order to keep the heat warning valid. But they are projected to only reach about 30 degrees. So by Wednesday, we'll start to see the temperatures get down just below criteria again.
Okay, our next question will go to Randy Thomas, 93.1 The Border. Go ahead, Randy.
Hi there. Judging from the maps that were shown earlier, it does, and you've indicated that the system's kind of moving eastward. I noticed though the red spot on the map seems to get smaller as it goes toward the east. I'm in northwestern Ontario, so just wondering, is that red spot going to get into northwestern Ontario? Are we going to be impacted in any way by this system, or temperature is going to be diminished by then?
That's a great question. Northwestern Ontario is going to be right on the fringe of that heat. If I take a moment here to take a quick look, I can offer perhaps a few more details. But essentially that heat, that ridge is essentially going to be retreating south as it transitions east. So it's while it may touch on northwestern Ontario a bit, it should be less pronounced than it is right now, for instance, over BC, and that it will be over Alberta and Saskatchewan. It will be diminishing in strength as it does transition east. That general heat is going to persist, as Armel was mentioning, through the weekend potentially, and then we'll see going forward from there. It's hard to offer too far into the future, but looking ahead to next to sort of late in the week and into the weekend, I would expect some warmer temperatures to touch on northwestern Ontario before that ridge fully moves south and retreats back into the United States.
You talked a little bit about the threat to the to forests and forest fire activity. There's been areas where they have received a lot of rain. I guess this system is going to dry out any moisture that's in the forest very quickly.
Yes, that is a fair assumption. Typically, meteorological conditions that favor forest fires are hot and dry conditions. Usually, if it's windy or if there is any active weather that tends to be dry without precipitation, for instance, you get the lightning strikes. Those are sort of the four things that meteorologists are monitoring to assist our partners with any wildfire forecasting that they're doing. So yes, this is not a favorable setup for forest fires. Not favorable in terms of it being good for forest fires. It's yeah, all the ingredients are there for forest fires, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go to the next question from Catherine Dornian, Global News. Catherine, go ahead.
Hi. The map looks like that heat system is going to hit Western Manitoba the most. So I was just curious what communities in the west side of our province are going to get hit by that heat.
Okay. Great question. Yes, it is going to affect, it's going to essentially drift from west to east. That sort of maximum of anomalously warm temperatures will drift across the province. So looking at Western Manitoba, you're looking at temperatures, for instance, in Brandon reaching 32 degrees on Thursday. It'll be touching close to 30, leading up to that on Wednesday, and still kind of dribbling around that 30-degree mark, possibly through the weekend as well, as that ridge kind of hangs around. It does sink south, but southwestern Manitoba will be in the window for it to extend a little bit longer than sort of the end of the week. It's definitely going to be warm. It'll be sunny. And it'll probably be increasingly muggy through the week as well. So I would expect overnight lows in the upper teens in the region.
Thanks so much. And could you just give us a snapshot kind of in and around Winnipeg? What are we expecting in terms of highs and lows there?
Oh, sure. In Winnipeg, we're looking at very similar temperatures. Honestly, you're looking at temperatures right around the 31 degree mark. Sunny conditions. Temperatures should start to climb on Wednesday, and the hottest temperatures will be Thursday, Friday, and it should linger close to the 30 mark through the weekend. Again, overnight lows are going to be quite warm. Should be make for a muggy sleep in Winnipeg with overnight lows in the upper teens there.
Okay. Our next question is for CTV Vancouver Island. Please identify yourself. Hear the name of the reporter.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. This is Yvonne Raymond. My question is for Armel, or I guess anyone. The first one is a technical question. How much of Vancouver Island are you considering in your comments when you refer to southern BC being affected?
Hi, Yvonne. Well, southern BC, of course, includes usually the southern 2/3 of Vancouver Island. Port Hardy, Port McNeill up there are generally a little bit sheltered a lot from this type of anomalous ridge coming in from the south. Often in 2021, it was the opposite. The center of the ridge was actually cresting right across central BC or central coast. So in this event, we are looking at, the southern half, including up to Campbell River and, up to Gold River for that matter, being affected by this extreme heat. The outer coast, like Tofino, Ucluelet, Port Renfrew, are largely spared just because of their proximity. And again, it's a flow that's mostly west to east for them, or essentially northwest down the outside of Vancouver Island. And then as we go forward into this event, deeper into this event, I should say, the rebounding ridge, as I mentioned, that will affect next weekend as well, will likely affect the very southwesternmost part of the province. So Vancouver Island will see those temperatures rebound over the course of the next week. When we kind of edge away from this heat warning, we will kind of get back into perhaps heat warning criteria. Maybe it will be just shy, but it will likely last for the Saturday, Sunday, maybe Sunday, Monday timeframe.
And my follow-up question is, from a public health perspective, people on Vancouver Island can be a bit dismissive around higher heat temperatures, given that we do kind of just hover around that 30-degree mark or less. And especially people who have lived in other provinces. Just from that heat-related perspective, how much do you think people should be dismissive, and how much do you think they should be seriously concerned about heat-related illnesses through this?
Yeah, it's an amazing question, and I can definitely appreciate that our Health Canada colleague could have a comment on this as well. What we talk about is often the context with which heat comes. And of course, if you're coming from another part of the country or another country altogether, it may feel like a cool down, and that's possible, and that's fine. But for the most part, just as Jennifer stated earlier, our May and June was actually quite near normal in terms of the temperature. In fact, it was a little bit subnormal for many days in a row. A lot of people were talking about January, for instance. And so as a result, this is really the first heat of the season when we know that it's going to be probably the most impactful time when we are going through that inflection point and being exposed to it. So it's a great time to reach out to your friends and family that are maybe elderly or who have those pre-existing medical conditions, just as Peter mentioned earlier, and just make sure that this is in context. Yeah, there is a moderate risk to society with this event. It is not very high and about to affect hundreds and hundreds of people. That is not what the medical community has shared with us at Environment and Climate Change Canada.
Our Health Canada colleagues have it. Shall we continue?
Yeah, no, that's great. I think it was really helpful to highlight that, it is the first heat wave. And so some people may not be acclimatized, which is important in terms of some of the health risks. And actually, some people may not be in the habit of protecting themselves from heat, given that this is early in the season. So this is, it's still really important to prepare, particularly, as Armel mentioned, for people that may require assistance. There are a number of population groups that are at higher risk, that are disproportionately affected by heat, seniors and young children, people with chronic illnesses. And so they can still be affected if we're not taking the preparations that we need to take.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Our next question, apologies, will come to Chris Allard. And then we're going to just mentioning that we're going to be continuing until roughly 3:15 in Eastern Canada for the next 15 minutes, and then we're going to close it out. So Chris Allard, if you have a question, go ahead and please state your outlet.
Hi, it's actually Grace Key with Global BC in Vancouver. My question is, can you just sort of list, and you've mentioned this before, but list all the things that makes this event stand out, or this event gives you particular concerns? I mean, you mentioned it was the first one. It's a little easy earlier. Is it prolonged? Is it more widespread throughout the province?
Yeah, great question, Grace. I would reiterate that because it's the first event and that the spring and early summer have been not extremely warm, the idea around acclimatization is extremely important. So this will be an inflection point for many places, right across the province. I mean, really, it's only kind of the Dominica and the extreme northwest of BC that are unaffected or lesser affected. So this is going right up into the northeast part of the country, and so that's why there is a certain element of attention for this event. But it is again not as strong, so it doesn't necessitate anticipation that this will become a really widely impactful event from a health point of view. And as I also mentioned earlier, this is an event that will cure the fuels in the forests, in the soils, extremely quickly. We had a morning meeting with the BC Wildfire Service, and that is the very strong concern as we go deeper into this week and some of the perturbations, the dry cold fronts, the dry lightning starts to populate our province, and that will start to change the tone of how the forests react and of course the operational environment with respect to wildfire fighting. So that will be something that will evolve through the rest of this week and obviously the rest of summer, especially since this event looks to be the start of a very warm stretch without a real obvious end to it. We could start to see some cooler temperatures, but it will take into next week before we see those for a BC context.
And my follow is just, you mentioned the discussions about forest fires, and you talked about lightning. I think you said Tuesday and Wednesday. So, how likely is it that we're going to start to see forest fires in the next couple of days?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, obviously the authority is the BC Wildfire Service, and we work quite in quite close collaboration, kind of every day throughout the summer, particularly when things are heightened. And then maybe another point of context is that we're dealing with essentially a 2-year precipitation deficit, and dating back to late summer of 2022. And of course, we saw what we saw in 2023. We don't need to rehearse that calamity, but coming into this spring, concerns were extremely high, and we got very lucky. We got a lot of rain in many parts of the interior, and that really is a mitigating factor as to why we didn't go into more evacuations and more smoke than we already have with the holdover fires from 2023. But that can be eroded extremely quickly, and those are words straight up from Natural Resource Canada and our BC wildfire service colleagues, who really say that, in a span of 7 to 10 days, even at regular July heat levels, and this is well above those regular July heat levels, we are going to evaporate all of that moisture in the surface fuels and then expose those deeper drought conditions in the subsurface. And that's when, of course, fires lose their ability to be put into control and mitigate them further through the adaptation measures. So yeah, the concern is very high. The convective forecast with dry lightning is also very tricky. So we have some concerns for Tuesday afternoon and again on Wednesday, but those details will be determined over the rest of today and of course into tomorrow and Wednesday.
Okay, next question from Liam O'Connor with CBC Saskatchewan. Go ahead, Liam.
Hi there. So I'm just wondering if we could get a more broad view of what Saskatchewan is going to look like and what the hot spots are, some of those max temperatures that we'll see maybe today and the next couple of days, and if there are any records that are broken or looking like they might get broken.
Very good question. I can certainly give you an indication of what the temperatures are expected to be. I don't have records on my fingertips at this moment, but it is looking like sort of across the region, you're definitely going to see about 30 degrees Celsius in most places. But just looking at Moose Jaw, for instance, they might see close to 36 degrees on Thursday. Again, in Regina, looking at closer to 34 degrees as a max temperature for the event on Thursday. There's continued heat again in the north as well. So places like North Battleford are also going to see those low 30s, possibly close to 34 degrees Celsius. So it's pretty blanketed across the province where those warmer temperatures are going to be. Obviously getting much further north, you'll just touch on the 30 degrees mark. And again, Wednesday is probably going to be the hottest day in the far north of Saskatchewan. To get a sense of whether records will be broken, yeah, there's potential for some to be broken, especially right farther south, right along the Canada-US border. In particular, there are some possibilities of records being broken. I don't have specifics though.
Thank you. And then for my follow-up, I just had a question about the smoke, because in Regina today it was quite bad. I think it was 9 on the index level. And so I'm wondering, where exactly is that smoke coming from? And are we going to expect more of that in the days to come?
That is a very good question. There is a lot of smoke that is being generated by the forest fires in southern Northwest Territories, northeastern BC, northern Alberta area. And that plume of smoke that has developed in the area is shifting south and east. It has to do with where the winds are blowing aloft. And so they're moving around the ridge and they're blowing southeast into Saskatchewan. So yes, there is poor air quality, especially in the far north of air quality, where an air quality advisory is issued. That's only issued when the air quality health index is above 10 and specific to wildfire smoke. Further south, we have the special air quality statement in place, and that is again alerting residents to very high levels of I guess on the air quality health index, very high levels of pollution and poor air quality. And just looking ahead at how that is going to be moving forward in time, it's definitely going to be lingering around Saskatchewan for the next next couple of days. I don't have much information that goes far into the future, but the long-term pattern is certainly showing that smoke plume in Saskatchewan persisting for the next couple of days.
Okay, the next question will go to Donovan Mayes at CTV Regina. Sorry if I misspelled said your last.
No worries. Thank you so much. I guess kind of building on that question about the smoke, and maybe this is a question for Health Canada as well, but how does the smoke and the heat kind of interact with each other in terms of, does that make the heat worse? Does that increase the risk for vulnerable populations? Things.
That's a very good question. I will share the answer with Health Canada for certain on this one. But in terms of from a weather perspective, the two events are coincident. There is a ridge of high pressure over the area that's creating a very stagnant, slow-moving air mass, and we've got smoke that has moved into the area, and there's no mechanism to remove it at this stage. So we're waiting for that ridge to collapse and for weather systems to move through the area to flush out that smoke. So for now, it's just going to be lingering in the area with nowhere to go.
Yeah, and I mean, both of these can pose very serious risks to health, both extreme heat and wildfire smoke. And we've documented this in a national climate change and health assessment that we released in 2022, the different health impacts. And what I think is a really important is some of the people that I mentioned this before that are most vulnerable to extreme heat health impacts, such as people with chronic diseases like lung disease or heart disease, or even people with mental illness. They can be at higher risk to wildfire smoke. And another, I think, really important component to this is, how does one protect themselves when both are happening? And Health Canada has some information on protecting yourself from wildfire smoke and from extreme heat. And the key message that one needs to prioritize protecting yourself from extreme heat, because the risk can be greater when these happen concurrently.
Sorry, if you're not on, if you could.
What?
Sorry, we're having trouble hearing. Was that Donovan's question or was that somebody else speaking? If so, please mute yourself when not called upon. Donovan, do you have a follow-up question or can we continue?
Yes, thank you. And it's all good. My last question is surrounding the humidity, just because I think Saskatchewan residents haven't had to deal with the humidity, at least in the last couple of years. So I guess, what are we looking at in terms of the humidex? What does that do for temperatures? And how should residents kind of, I guess, or how does that change how residents could be impacted by the heat?
Again, I'll share this answer with our health partners on this one. But essentially, when there's a high humid environment, it makes it a lot harder for the body to cool off. And so that's where the humidex value comes into play. It's essentially an equation, and it was created to take into account temperature and moisture levels in the atmosphere, or the humidity, for instance, and create a number that represents how unpleasant it will be when the two are combined. So it gives an indication of what risk there might be to someone who is vulnerable to heat conditions where they may not be able to cool off easily. So when we're expecting humid conditions, it is likely not to be humid conditions like, for instance, were experienced in the east a couple of weeks ago during that big heat wave, but certainly muggy for the prairies. An additional item that is a factor this time of year is it's growing season. So there's a lot more crops, things that are in bloom that add moisture to the environment. So you've got a muggy air mass that's moving in, and you've got additional moisture from the vegetation as well that's contributing to a muggier environment. And really, it's just going to be a limiting factor for those overnight lows. They can't cool off as much when it is moist outside, and so it just keeps the overnight lows warmer than they would otherwise be, making it difficult to cool off. And then those daytime highs, it just feels worse outside. Your humidex is your feels like temperature, and it's your a measure of your body's ability to cool off. I'll pass it on to Peter if you'd like to make a comment.
I think you covered that quite well, Jen. I mean, particularly emphasizing the inability, and this has been mentioned, to not have some respite from heat overnight. The body some hours, or it will overheat, and it leads to heat illness. So that's really quite important. Looking at both the daytime and nighttime temperatures from a health perspective. But I think that's all I'd add to that. Thank you.
Okay, we are running out of time. This concludes today's media availability. Thank you. Ceci se conclut la conférence de presse. Merci beaucoup. If you have additional questions, si vous avez des questions additionnelles, envoyez une courriel à media.ec.gc.ca. So send an email to media@ec.gc.ca if you have further questions. We'll do our best to address them. Thanks so much.